Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, £600 million has been wiped off the value of the NatWest Group following the shock dead-of-night resignation of its boss, Dame Alison Rose. Her departure followed significant concerns raised in Number 10 about Nigel Farage, Coutts Bank and Britain's war on woke. Our business correspondent, Simon Pusey, will soon be joining me for the latest on the fallout. And over the past 2 weeks, extreme heat in southern Europe has ravaged homes and businesses and forced tens of thousands of tourists to flee holiday resorts. Climate scientists warn that a further increase of global temperature will bring much more extreme weather. Chloe Nordred, a spokesperson for the environmental activist group Just Stop Oil, will soon be joining me from Bristol to share her views. Then later, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. But first, former Delta State Governor James Ibori has been ordered to hand more than £100 million to Britain in one of the largest confiscation orders imposed by a UK court. Ibori admitted 10 charges of fraud and money laundering in 2012 after being extradited to Britain from Dubai. He served half of a 13-year jail sentence. In 2021, the UK returned £4.2 million looted by Ibori to Nigeria. Judge David Tomlinson told Southwark Crown Court that Ibori must pay immediately or be jailed for 8 years. Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima has joined other African leaders at the second Russia-Africa Summit, which is being held in St. Petersburg. In recent years, the Kremlin has been scrambling for greater influence in the continent, but last week's collapse of the Ukraine grain deal has caused deep concern within the drought-crippled Horn of Africa. Around 20 heads of state are thought to have participated in this year's gathering, less than half of the 43 who attended the inaugural summit in 2019.
Африканский континент становится новым центром силы.
The African continent is indeed becoming a new centre of power. Its political and economic role is growing exponentially. Everyone will have to take this reality into account. For example, let's look at the initiative by a number of African states on solving the Ukraine crisis, which is an acute problem we are not shying away from reviewing.
Украинского кризиса. Это острая проблема, мы не уходим от его рассмотрения.
It itself says a lot. Previously, any mediation missions were monopolized exclusively by countries with so-called advanced democracies. Not anymore. Now Africa is ready to help to solve the problems that seem outside its primary interests. We treat your initiatives with respect and carefully study them.
Мы с уважением относимся к вашим инициативам и внимательно их рассматриваем. Реальный практический шаг по существенной активизации.
We are interested in close cooperation with the law enforcement agencies and special services of Russia and African countries. We plan to continue training African law enforcement and military units in Russia's specialized learning facilities.
Учебных заведениях. Дорогие друзья, развиваем партнерство в военной и военной...
We're developing our partnership in military and military technology areas. Russia has reached agreements with more than 40 countries of Africa, to which we are supplying a wide array of military hardware. Part of these supplies are being provided free of charge to strengthen the sovereignty and security of those countries.
Allow me to convey my sincere gratitude for the donation of 11,000 metric tons of potash fertilizer and 9,000 metric tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer. This gesture is true testimony of the friendship of the Russian Federation to the people of Zimbabwe. This further reflects your personal commitment to support the transformation of our country's agriculture in the attainment of food security and sovereignty. I thank you.
As Nigerians await the formation of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's cabinet, international observers insist that his choice of oil minister and head of NNPC will be critical to investor confidence. Oil production in the country has been blighted by large-scale theft and vandalism, as well as decades of underinvestment in infrastructure. The gas sector is not faring much better, with analysts suggesting a price cap on the domestic market has limited investment. Dr. Babaji Babajide Ogunbiade, the CEO of Alpha Energy USA, joined me earlier to share his views on the sector. Dr. Ogunbiade is a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers and one of the world's leading subsea production experts.
My advice to this new government to boost investors' confidence and actually really to help in transforming the industry is to have a substantive petroleum minister, or even if the president is going to hold that position, you want clear policy directions from the Minister of Petroleum going directly into the oil, oil minister, the head of the national oil company. What we've had in the past is to have this Minister of State whose role is extremely ambiguous and it really has no powers. And then the Minister of Petroleum, the head of the national oil company is really not taking any directive from him, but it's there. So we have all kind of mismatch, policy mismatch and confusion in the policy. So I think there has to be a clear direction and clear reporting line between the Minister of Petroleum and the head of the national oil company. If we can achieve that, I believe that it's going to bring tremendous clarity into the industry, and it's going to mitigate all of the issues that we've been having in the sector. The key thing for Nigeria is focus on gas. As you probably know, Nigeria is mostly a gas country with massive potential in that sector that is not being utilized. You have to give a lot of kudos to this current government. Some of the initial initiative that you've seen them take is to put a lot of emphasis on the gas sector, which is very impressive and encouraging to me. So I understand that there's a pipeline system between Nigeria going up to Morocco, then leading to Europe that obviously can help us to monetize tremendously our gas resources. But that's still 10 years out. So for Nigeria, the emphasis has to be on building FLNG or LNG facilities all over the place. We need to, so recently you have the UTM floating production LNG that the president actually really showcased. And that means that they have a good understanding of what needs to be happening. Nigeria needs to have several floating production LNG facility before the Nigeria-Morocco pipeline system leading to Europe is completed. We need to have several floating LNG facilities and floating production facilities and have this gas compressed and sent to Europe. That will completely transform this economy. So focus investment on LNG, FLNG, is what is going to be critical. Like you said, there's a hunger, there's a gap for the industry in the world economy for gas. Nigeria is a major gas country, and but we can pipe this gas, but we can build LNG facilities, and we can make 10 times more money from gas than we're making in oil.
Back here in the UK, the City of London is still reeling following the dead-of-night resignation of NatWest boss Dame Alison Rose. Her departure was announced at 1:45 a.m. on Wednesday morning, following an emergency meeting of the bank's board. The 54-year-old, who had worked at the bank for more than 3 decades, was forced out after admitting a serious error of judgment when she discussed the former UKIP leader Nigel Farage's relationship with private bank Coutts, with BBC business editor Simon Jack during a charity dinner. Shares in NatWest, which owns Coutts, dropped almost 3% in early trading following her departure. This wiped more than £600 million off the value of the high street lender. Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our business correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, I was just saying to you off air, every single week there's always another unprecedented story, but this one really is. It started off on Twitter. It's ended up at number 10. It's completely engulfed City News. Dame Alison Ross has resigned after more than 30 years at NatWest. Can you just kind of unravel the story? Because there are many layers to this.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly what the government want at the moment. They want to sort of play this culture wars thing, and so it's come at just the right time because people are not really talking about the cost of living, they're talking about this. But let's rewind, talk a bit about who Nigel Farage is. Yes. He's in and around the headlines all the time, of course, but he was the former leader of the UKIP party. They were campaigning to get the UK out of Europe, which they've obviously successfully done. Then he was the leader of the Brexit campaign when it was in those kind of final stages.
Very successful.
Exactly, and he's never been elected as an MP, but he's been around politics a long time, and he is a very divisive figure, but he seems to be one who a lot of people do follow and do agree with, a sort of straight-talking, beer-drinking, nice guy kind of person with his the right kind of values for a lot of people. Basically, he was a banker. He was a customer at a bank called Coutts. Now, Coutts is a bank for people with lots of money. So he had over you need either £1 million of savings, either £3 million of savings or at least £1 million of investments. He was then denied an account, even though he'd been banking with them for over a decade. When he asked why, the official answer came via a BBC interview that he'd done, someone at the BBC had done with Coutts that said he didn't meet the threshold, so he didn't have enough money. Now, Nigel Farage didn't deny that, but he said he'd never really had enough money, and he thinks there's another reason. So he went in, put in a request for some documents, and subsequently obtaining these documents, 40 pages, flagged concerns that he was xenophobic and racist, and also questioned the reputational risk of having Mr. Farage as a client. So then that opens up a whole new raft of questions, and we're then into the stages of, well, what is a valued customer in terms of what kind of values do you need to be a bank at Coutts, which, by the way, is 39% owned by the taxpayer because it is owned by NatWest, which is 39% owned by the taxpayer. So there is definitely public interest in this story because Absolutely. It's a publicly owned bank, or a lot of it is. So when this all started to unravel, it turned out that the fact that he didn't have enough money in there was actually a bit of a smokescreen, a little bit of a lie. And so, as you said, Dame Alison Rose came out and apologised and said she'd made an error of judgment. It really sort of fell on her. She's the chief executive of NatWest Bank.
She was gossiping, wasn't she?
She is now quit, and the boss of Coutts in the last few hours has quit as well. Nigel Farage saying more people should go. And it's really interesting to see the government stepping in really fast on this. When there's issues within the Conservative Party, they try and firefight and they try and sweep them under the carpet. But here they were right in, Mr. Sunak and also Mr. Hunt, right in there commenting saying, well, this can't happen again, and we really need to regulate more. We need to look into this. And I think, like I said at the start of this, they really want this kind of thing to happen because they want people to be talking about how identity politics, being woke, on freedom of expression, being on the right side of the argument. They want those kind of culture wars to emerge, so people don't talk about the cost of living. They don't talk about the various policies that Rishi Sunak, those 5 policies, that he's not meeting any of them. That inflation is still incredibly high. The boats are still coming over. They don't want to talk about that because it's not going well for the government on those things. They want to talk about things like this. So I think it's kind of come at the perfect time for them, having just lost 2 by-elections, to try and change the discourse to talk about stuff like this.
Absolutely, and everyone is talking about it, but away from kind of the joke and the Twitter storm that it's caused. This is quite serious, isn't it? And it's talking about a politically exposed person. Yes, we know Nigel Farage is. And as you said, a divisive figure. Not everybody likes him, but it seems like most people do agree that, hang on, what happened here? Coutts and NatWest were way out of line.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly why people are resigning now, because obviously you cannot deny someone, even if it's a private bank, and if you go into sort of private institutions, you could say, oh, well, they can serve who they want, but actually there's you have human rights. You can't be denied based on your sexuality or your religion, and so your political opinions as well. That's going into a very murky area if you start to stop serving people based on that. So I think generally across the board, absolutely, and whether more regulations will follow in terms of banks need to but I think it was fairly obvious that they shouldn't be doing this kind of thing, and that's why I think you're going to see probably more heads rolling, which is what Nigel Farage is looking for. He's looking for wholesale resignations over this. But yeah, it's very, very interesting, and I guess this will be the pinnacle, unless, as he says that this is the tip of the iceberg. Lots more people have had similar kind of things happen to them. So maybe this is going to unearth a big scandal that we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks. But it might just be that this is the thing that sort of nails it, and all the banks get in line and make sure that this doesn't happen again, because it's not a good look. And we've just seen Dame Alison Rose was a huge figure within banking and a huge figure for female business. Absolutely. And she's quit.
Yes, extraordinary. A story that I think, yes, we're probably going to come back to, aren't we? Thank you, Simon. In a moment, I'll be sharing a reaction to Southern Europe's wildfires from Chloe Nordret, a spokesperson for the environmental activist group Just Stop Oil. But until then, here's a breakdown of the biggest business news stories of the week. Barbie has surpassed records previously held by the Super Mario Brothers by achieving the biggest blockbuster opening of the year in North America. The flick, which has taken the social media world by storm, raked in a massive $155 million this past weekend, breaking the opening weekend record for a film directed by a woman. Film critics say this was the comeback weekend Hollywood had been dreaming of ever since the pandemic, as Universal's Oppenheimer also had a stellar opening. The data is released as studio bosses continue to negotiate with striking actors and writers over fair contracts. Joe Lewis, the billionaire real estate investor and owner of English Premiership football club Tottenham Hotspur, has been charged in the US over multiple alleged insider trading. The 86-year-old, who is one of Britain's richest men, is accused of tipping off associates with non-public information about companies in which he had invested. A lawyer for Lewis says he will defend the ill-conceived charges vigorously. Europe's busiest airline, RussiaAir, has reported profit after tax of €663 million in the second quarter of this year. The figure more than doubles the quarterly average achieved before the pandemic. The positive trading update comes as thousands of holidaymakers are being evacuated from the popular holiday island of Rhodes in Greece due to wildfires. RussiaAir said it continued to operate flights as usual to Rhodes Airport, which is not in an area directly affected by the fires so far. Let's remain with this topic of extreme temperatures in southern Europe, which has ravaged homes and businesses and forced tens of thousands of tourists to flee holiday resorts. Climate scientists warn that a further increase of global temperature will bring much more extreme weather across the globe. Environmental activist groups like the UK's Just Stop Oil believe there is much more that world leaders can do to delay and/or prevent a significant climate emergency.
I think what's interesting about the wildfires that we're seeing in Europe at the moment, I mean, obviously they're also raging through territories in Canada, and I'm sure Australia as well at various points, but the ones that are in Europe at the moment feel very interesting to me, because I think in this country we're not on the front line of the climate crisis in the way that many other communities around the world are, and therefore it's quite difficult for people in the UK to comprehend the enormity of what's going on. And I think it's very interesting when we suddenly see these wildfires happening in places that we're used to going to on holiday, places that we might have visited, and places that we might know quite well, and to see that kind of sense of absolute terror, people picking up their children and running away from these out of control fires. I think it's going to shift the public consciousness in this part of the world in a way that is absolutely necessary and urgent. So I hope that whilst this is obviously an absolutely terrible thing to be happening to so many people in so many communities, particularly in Europe at the moment, but also elsewhere, I hope that this is a wake-up call for people all over Europe, and of course particularly people in my country. Particular commentators are really enjoying the fact that it's cost so much to police Just Stop Oil. What they're not talking about is the cost of our inaction. What is it going to cost in terms of damages to our economy, to people's homes, to people's lives, if we don't take this action now? It's much more cost effective. There's an economic and there's a moral case for taking action right now. I don't personally think our mission is to win over the British public. If we were going about a campaign that was designed to get us the approval of the right-wing media or even the mainstream media in this country, we wouldn't be going about it in this way. We'd be doing something completely different. The purpose of Just Stop Oil is not public popularity. We're not trying to get elected. We're not interested in the approval of right-wing media commentators. What we're interested in is our government ceasing all new licenses of oil and gas projects. That is the only important thing. And if people decide that they hate us in pursuit of that goal, I personally don't care. What I care about is our government taking the necessary action to protect us in this country right now, to protect my children in the future, and it's the very least that we owe to our global community around us.
The US government says it will embark on a trade tour of African nations, including South Africa and Ghana, but is sceptical about Nigeria due to the country's foreign currency rate barrier. Earlier this month, US delegates present in Abuja at a meeting hosted by the American Business Council Nigeria said conversations were ongoing in the US to strengthen the relationship. According to recent figures, in 2021, Nigeria exported $3.69 billion to the United States, with the main products being crude petroleum, refined petroleum, and petroleum gas. Uber Michael, a member of the Nigerian American Chamber of Commerce and the chairman of Ubercal Group, caught up with me to share his views.
Nigeria, since 1960, has had diplomatic relations. They've had diplomatic relations since 1960, and they also have the binational commission, which they hold meetings regularly. So I would not say the relations is quite worse, but I would say that there has been a decline in trade between Nigeria and the US, because when you look at the numbers, look at what China is doing in Nigeria, about 46% of our 36%, I'm sorry, 26% rather of our import is from China, while only 5% comes from the United States, which is premium motor spirit, oil, some agro products, and hugely cars and heavy duty machineries. So I think they need to look inward and they need to review it. Nigeria is the biggest economy. You can't do without us in Africa. We are a major player in the world. We're a major player in Africa. Our president is the chairman of the economic of ECOWAS, and I think they really have to reconsider. They really have to reconsider.
As citizens of Nigeria, Ghana and at least 17 other African nations still face visa bans by the UAE, one successful businessman living in Dubai is hopeful that Nigeria's new administration may usher in a renewal of bilateral ties. Nigeria's non-oil bilateral trade is valued at over $2 billion with the UAE, while thousands of Nigerians have in recent years turned to the country as a major destination for real estate investment. Here are the thoughts of Stephen Akintayo, the CEO of the GTEX Group.
If you're investing in real estate with up to 2 million dirhams, you are going to be given a residency, yes, and you can come, you can own your business, you can do business with them. So those of us who live there, we're constantly talking with friends that we know are close to the ruling families or the government, and I think they're also concerned. And I tell people that UAE is more interested in Nigeria than Nigeria is even interested in UAE. Because each time you sit with officials, they're really interested in Africa. They understand that they can trust Africa more than the West, but we need our leaders to also get their things right. But UAE is open for business. It's one of the, particularly for real estate, rental income has gone up, highest in history of years, last year, this year. Amazing income for those who invested in real estate. They're just killing it. The income is just fantastic. Even capital appreciation has been amazing as a rental income in UAE as well. They're also hosting UN climate change, November, December COP 28. And so there's just so much good news about UAE, and we're excited doing business there.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.